Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, where we discuss all the news in the world of Major League Baseball. My name is Ben.
And as always, my name is Jeremiah, and we are back with another action-packed show for you guys today. And I think this is the first show we've done together in like 3 weeks.
It's probably one of the first.
It's been like a month because
I was sick last week, and then you were on vacation, and then you were out of the studio, and
this is the first show I think we're doing together in a new year.
Well, yeah, because it's our first show in the new year.
Well, no, like us together. Me.
Oh, you're talking about in general, like not just on the baseball show, but in general.
In general, here at the network.
I'm pretty sure it is.
No, it is. There's no doubt about that.
So happy New Year.
Happy New Year, and how was your? How have you been, Ben? How have you been? I feel like it's been weeks since I've seen you.
I see you almost every day.
I know, but the listeners don't know that.
I'm doing really well.
I'm kidding.
I was a little sick last week.
You were here on Friday, so...
I was a little sick last week, feeling a little under the weather. I had a cold. My voice was sounding kind of froggy, a little raspy, but I am good. I am back. I am healthy. And
you are off the DL.
I'm ready to lead off a great 2017 with an episode of The Baseball Show.
Yes, and like I've said this on every show, there is no off-season here at the GSMC Podcast Network. And we're here until the start. Actually, we're probably going to be here. We're never going to stop doing this show. But we do have some news, some speculation, basically more speculation. And we're going to be talking about where we think the biggest names are going to land, in trade talks. We're going to discuss who had the best offseason, which team had the worst offseason. We're going to discuss a little bit of minor deals that happened in the past 24 hours momentarily. But, Ben, you wanted to start off the show with a special shout-out to the MVP.
Yes, happy birthday, Chris Bryant. Today turns 25 years of age. Throughout his first 2 seasons, he has the highest WAR, wins above replacement, at 13.6. Higher than any player ever. Second is Frank Robinson at 13.4, and third is Ted Williams at 13. So KB, very, very important to what the Cubs are doing. And obviously, wins the MVP, very, very important for their World Series run.
Yes, and very important indeed. And I was going to say, happy birthday, Chris Bryant. Congrats to the Chicago Cubs on another successful season. I do expect them to be a World Series contender again. Let's officially start the show. So we had a couple of minor deals that we don't really have to talk about, we kind of do have to talk about. We do have to talk about, but we like to cover a lot of things here on the show. The Oakland Athletics have kind of been a little busy this offseason, but they haven't made a big splash as we're kind of accustomed to Billy being, doing. So the Athletics they have agreed to sign a deal with former Cleveland Indians outfielder Rajai Davis, and it is a 1-year, $6 million contract. Davis actually did revive his career in his first season with Cleveland. He was actually very critical last season, getting to the Indians to the World Series. He had a very good game, and game 7 Game 7 of the World Series when he hit that 2-run home run to tie the game. And, it was like really one of the most magical moments in that game. But, of course, the Indians went on to lose that game as the Cubs became the World Series champions. But, Rajai Davis had a really good year last year. He led the American League with 43 steals. He kind of solidified the outfield when Michael Brantley went down, who hasn't really came back from shoulder surgery, and Michael Brantley has been hurt for the past couple of years. So I kind of like the move. But, we're talking about the Oakland A's here, so as far as assigning an aging outfielder to a team that really struggled last year, I think maybe it's a move to bring in some leadership, to a team that hasn't really done a whole lot the past couple of years, that has a lot of young outfielders there, a lot of young players. So I do like the move from that aspect, but, Rajai Davis is not the type of player that's going to help you win right away. But from like a leadership, locker room, clubhouse aspect, I do like the move. I
agree. It's a guy who's been with the organization before Cleveland. He spent some time with the A's, so he's already familiar with the area, the team, management, the sort of their style of play. You mentioned 43 steals last year, 36 years old, so he's still got some speed left in his giddy-up. And it's kind of what the A's like to do, play small ball, a guy who can maybe turn a single into a double into a triple, get on base via a walk, maybe steal a base, get in scoring position. So he kind of fits their scheme and their play style, and he's already been there, so he knows what to expect by going there.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, Davis had a very magical moment in Game 7 of the World Series. He hit that 2-run home run off Aroldis Chapman, who was the closer for the Cubs at that time. He's not with the Cubs anymore. It tied at 6-6 in the 8th inning, but like I said earlier, the Indians lost that game 8-7 in extra innings. It went all the way to the 10th. So Cleveland failed to win its first World Series title since 1948. Even though a qualifying average wasn't extended to Davis, Indians president Chris Agnonetti, I think that's how you say his name, said the team has strong interest in re-signing him. But I guess they wanted to move forward with other ways. The Indians, they've been busy themselves. They signed Edwin Encarnacion last week to a 3-year, $60 million deal. I believe that's what it was.
Yep.
But Davis did finish the year with 12 homers, 48 RBIs, and 454 at-bats. Did lead the league with 42 steals, was an important part of that team. But I think that the Indians wanted to get younger, or they needed to. They wanted to add power, so to speak, in Encarnacion, which was a deal that I actually liked. I really actually liked Cleveland's lineup heading to next year. I think if Michael Brantley would be able to get healthy and stay healthy, I think it's a very powerful lineup that can really contend again.
I actually called that move on the show a couple weeks ago. You were out of the studio one day, and I was talking about some remaining free agents that are left, some big-name ones. And I mentioned Encarnacion, and I thought a perfect fit would be Cleveland, and that's honestly where he went. So I give myself a little pat on the back there. But
Good job.
Thank you. I appreciate It's not very common that I get something right, but when I do, I'm definitely going to be happy about it. So
yes, good job, and I applaud you for it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Much obliged.
And then we had another minor, deal that happened past couple of hours. Right-hander Drew Storen has signed a 1-year contract with the Reds, and I like the lead in this story that ESPN wrote. It said right-hander Drew Storen dressed for Halloween as his favorite Reds player when he was growing up. Now he gets a chance to wear a Cincinnati uniform of his own next season. So I kind of like that. He dressed up as his favorite player who played in the Cincinnati Reds. Now he gets to wear that uniform. And the contract is worth $3 million, and it is for 1 year. And this is actually the first move to improve Cincinnati's bullpen. Drew Storen he's had a couple good years, lately in Washington. And the 29-year-old, I think he actually can make an additional $1.5 million in performance bonuses under the deal announced Tuesday. So he would get $500,000 if he's traded. So he would get paid no matter what. So the part of Storen's attraction to the Reds was the chance for to make a play for the team. He followed as a youth in Indianapolis. So Drew Storen, he grew up as a Cincinnati Reds fan. Now he gets to play with the team that he grew up cheering. And I think that's really great. I think that's always cool, to play for the team you always grew up watching. I think that's what Brandon Crawford of the San Francisco Giants, the shortstop, he grew up a Giants fan. Now he's playing for his favorite team. He's won World Series with the team. I kind of like that when it happens for a player that goes on to play for their favorite team that they grew up as a child watching. And I think I just love that. It just makes me feel good.
I've always wondered what that would feel like, because you're kind of, obviously you have to be professional, have to do what you're supposed to do, but you kind of have like a little fanboy moment, like you have to.
Yeah, exactly. You have to have that little fanboy moment. But we're gonna take our first break here on the show, and we're gonna get into some speculation where we think the top. Not really top free agents, but some of the big names that have been involved in trade rumors for the past month. Where do we think they're going to end up? And I think there is a couple of free agents out there, too, that are still unsigned, that when we'll kind of speculate where we think they'll end up. But we'll talk about that when we get back here at the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. And we're going to get into some speculation talk here regarding some big names that have been involved in some trade rumors, so to speak, for the past month or so. One of the big names that have been talked about being traded has been Andrew McCutchen. And another name out there that has been involved in rumors is Brian Dozier. Brian Dozier led off-second baseman with 42 home runs last year. The Twins are really bad, and I do think they can use some really good prospects to build in the future. Andrew McCutchen, he's been kind of linked towards the Toronto Blue Jays. They haven't signed Jose Bautista. I don't know if they are, because Jose Bautista has struggled with injuries this year, and he is getting another year older. And Encarnacion decided to go to Cleveland. So that does make sense for me. So Brian Dozier has been involved with teams that he's generated interest from the Giants, from the Dodgers, I believe, the Nationals, lots of teams. Brian Dozier, he's very athletic. I think that's something that hasn't been talked about his game. He was like a steal away from having a 2020 season a couple years ago. He's a really good base runner. He's obviously a powerful hitter. Really good. He's a really good defensive baseman. He's really good, and I think the only knock on Brian Dozier has been, his strikeout ratio. He has a problem with strikeouts still, but it's baseball. Everyone strikes out. But what are your thoughts on these two free agents? Not free agents, so to speak, but these two big names. Ben, what are your two thoughts on these two big names and their speculative rumors?
I think both of their respective teams need to trade them. The Pirates need to trade Andrew McCutchen, and the Twins need to trade Brian Dozier, because they're both in rebuilding sort of schemes right now. They're not ready to push for a postseason berth. The Pirates were close last year, dealt with some injuries, McCutchen being one of them, but they're not really ready in my eyes, especially in that NL Central. And you look at the Twins, they had one of the worst records in baseball last year. Dozier was really their standout performer of the whole entire team. So if you could trade him for a ton of prospects, build your team, get younger. Dozier's 29 years old, so he's not old, but he's definitely in the middle part of his career. So if you can get some younger players to build around, you could probably get a lot from him, especially some of these teams reported, like possibly teams wanting him, maybe being the Dodgers. They have a ton of young players, and they're ready to really push for a postseason berth. So probably Dozier could be that one person to maybe put them over the hedge when it comes to teams in the National League, because I feel like the Mets are going to be a lot better this year. The Giants are going to be there. They improve their bullpen. The Cubs are obviously defending champions. So I think the Dodgers are looking to make that move, and Dozier could be that guy. They're going to be ready to make a trade for him. Reports are that no matter what happens with Brian Dozier, about a week from now, everything will be resolved. So the Twins will either come out and saying, we're not trading him at all, or a deal will obviously be put in place, and we'll be talking about it next week. So it'll be interesting to find out. And then you look at McCutchen. The Pirates are in a rebuilding mode. McCutchen's getting up there in age, and he struggled last year. So if they're looking to trade him, right now has got to be the time to trade him. Because if you wait until the season is going on, before the trade deadline, he could be slumping. He could be not having another good year. That's only going to hurt his trade value. So you're not going to get as much for him as you could right now. So I think it's important that they trade him now, because you're risking on how good of a year he's having to affect what you're getting back for him.
Yeah, and you said Andrew McCutchen did struggle, and that is true. Last season, Andrew McCutchen batted .256. He had a .336 on-base percentage and a .430 slugging percentage. Those are all career worst for Mr. McCutchen there in Pittsburgh. And you say McCutchen is getting old, but remember he turned 30 in October, so he's not as old as we think he is. These guys are very similar in age. Brian Dozier and Andrew McCutchen. The thing about Andrew McCutchen, though, the Pirates want guys that are major league ready right now that can help them compete in the majors in 2017. They want guys like that. Sure, they can get some prospects, but I think the biggest thing is that they want guys who are ready to compete in the majors. That can be some prospects that could be brought up this year, but they want guys that can help them win right now, because they are probably one of the toughest divisions of baseball. They got the defending champs there in Chicago. They got the St. Louis Cardinals. It's tough to win that division with those two teams there. As for Brian Dozier in the Minnesota Twins, I think the Twins need to trade Brian Dozier, because I think it is going to happen. I think the LA Dodgers is the most suitable team for Brian Dozier. It just makes too much sense for me. They got a lot of prospects. I think Jose De Leon can be a really good trade piece in this trade. If Minnesota happens to acquire Jose De Leon, that's a really nice prospect, because remember, they still got Jose Barrios there, who was brought up this year. He did struggle when he was in the majors, but it was just he clearly wasn't ready for the major leagues, but I do think he is going to be better. So by adding prospects that can help you win in the future in Minnesota, I think they have to trade Brian Dozier right now, because if they happen to keep Brian Dozier, I don't think this team is going to win anything. They were one of the worst teams. I think they were almost just as bad as Atlanta. Atlanta was probably worse than Minnesota. But I think these two guys will get traded soon. I think it's going to happen soon. Brian Dozier, I will be shocked if the Dodgers don't acquire Brian Dozier. As for McCutchen, though, I do like him in the Blue Jays, because the Blue Jays did lose two of their power hitters. I don't think they're going to re-sign Jose Bautista, because he did struggle with injuries, and he is getting older. Andrew Encarnacion went to the Indians, but I do think these two players are going to be moved relatively soon.
I'd love to see McCutchen go to the Mets.
That too, I think that can be a really good possibility as well. They got really good prospects. They got the trade pieces to do it too.
And Curtis Granderson's getting a little older. They traded for Jay Bruce last year at the deadline, but they're reportedly not too enthused about him anymore as when they were when they traded him from Cincinnati. So I feel like McCutchen could be a missing piece. The Mets are, in my eyes, really, really good team. They're just so injured last year. They missed out on really everything.
Not only that, they do still have Yoenis Cespedes, and with Yoenis Cespedes, Jay Bruce, and Andrew McCutchen, that's a pretty good outfield to me. I think that's a real good outfield, and Andrew McCutchen doesn't have to be the best hitter in that lineup. That's how good that lineup is. He doesn't have to be the best. See, when Pittsburgh, McCutchen has to be the best hitter. Even though they had really good production from guys like Gregory Polanco and Starling Marte, Andrew McCutchen was looked at as the franchise in Pittsburgh. I think kind of like in New York, I kind of think Cespedes is kind of looked at like as their franchise player right now, even though he didn't start there. He's basically been like their best player since Cespedes arrived in New York. So,
yeah, he's really a good hitter, opportunistic hitter is Andrew McCutchen. And for them, their pitching is really their strong suit. They just got to stay healthy. So he can be a good defender. He's good on the base pad still. So he could be a big contributor in New York if he goes there. It's just really a matter of if the Mets are going to pull the plug or not. And or any other team. You said Toronto. I'm sure there's other teams out there that are still inquiring about him. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and as for Brian Dozier, I think the Dodgers make too much sense there to not have him. I think that's the most sensible team because they got the pieces to do it.
That'd be a big time move. If you look at their lineup, you'd have Justin Turner obviously in the number 3 or 4 spot. You still have Adrian Gonzalez. You have Corey Seager, who could be your leadoff guy. Dozier was a leadoff hitter for Minnesota, but you could put him in the number 2 role even. So that'd be a really, really impressive lineup.
And then there'll be a World Series favorite, I think, in my opinion.
Even over the Cubs still?
They'll definitely be there. I think that lineup can. I think if they have Brian Dozier, he elevates that lineup that much.
Yeah, but for me, 2 things. Number 1, their pitching is still not very good. Exactly. They still need more starting pitching. I realized Rich Hill did pretty well for them on the trade deadline, but I don't see him replicating last year. And the same thing goes with Dozier. He hit 42 home runs. He's not going to do that as Chavez Ravine if he goes there. I
don't think so either. He just had a really good year.
He had a great year, yeah.
But, Brian Dozier, he brings power. He brings really good athleticism. He's a really good base runner. He can steal bases, really good defensive second baseman. I think he has tools to, even if he does hit 40 home runs again, I still think he'll be a valuable player no matter what.
I definitely agree with you. We'll have to see what happens. A week from now, everything should be resolved, so hopefully we'll have something to talk about next week.
Yeah, and we're going to take our last break, Ben, and when we come back, we're going to discuss our teams who have, in our opinion, had the best offseason or the worst offseason. So we'll talk about that when we come back here at the Going to Media Concepts in Baseball podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. And for our last segment today, we're going to discuss who we think had the best offseason and who had the worst offseason. So, Ben, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go? Do you want to start with the best or the worst?
Let's start off with the best.
Okay.
And I will go first because we have different teams. Although they are both Sox, I will go first. Okay. My best team of the offseason, the Boston Red Sox, for the simple fact that they were going for it all and picking up Chris Sale. They also added Mitch Moreland, who could be a DH if they want to put it that way, because David Ortiz did retire, so he has some pop to his game, so he could play DH, maybe some first base as well. But for me, it's because of Chris Sale. They gave up some prospects, a lot of prospects to get him, but you're getting him out of Chicago where great pitcher, but not necessarily the best temper. We saw what happened when he was cutting up the jerseys and everything. But now he's on a proven winning team that really just needed more pitching. The hitting's already there. They led the major leagues in runs last year. They're going to lose a lot with David Ortiz, but still you could put a DH in there. They still have a lot of great players. Their outfield is fantastic. Mookie Betts, Xander Bogaerts at shortstop. Jackie Bradley Jr. had a good season. Dustin Pedroia is a great leader for this team. So I say that adding pitching, if Chris Sale can come in there and contribute, You have David Price, who had a terrible year, so I think he has to have a better year than last year. Rick Porcello did win the Cy Young, but I'm not really sold on him because he got so much run support. That's why his record was so good at 22-4. His ERA was 3.15. So not the greatest, but it's not terrible. So those three guys, three legitimate starting pitchers for the postseason. You saw what happened to them in the first round, the divisional round against Cleveland. They got destroyed because Cleveland's pitching was so much superior as opposed to Boston's. So now Boston adds the pitching. They can still score runs. I think they're ready and primed to be the best team in the American League next year.
Yeah, and Chris Sale really makes them a World Series contender in my eyes. That was the missing link, I think, to Boston's playoff run last year was the pitching. They didn't have a lot. They did have a really strong offense, strong lineup, but in the playoffs, pitching wins games, and we clearly saw it last season with the Chicago Cubs and the Cleveland Indians in the World Series. The Cubs do have a good rotation, so it does matter. Pitching does matter. But going from the Red Sox, I want to talk about the White Sox. I do like what they did this year. They did trade Chris Sale. They did trade. Well, they're in trade talks to trade Jose Quintana to various teams. I think he might go to the Yankees, but there are some other teams that have shown interest in Quintana. But who they acquired from the trades that they made in the Chris Sale trade, they acquired Yohan Moncada, who is one of the best, who's a top 5 prospect heading to this year. Probably could have been in the majors heading to 2017. He was that good. They got Michael Kopech, who is one of the best, who actually is one of the best pitching prospects now in the White Sox organization. And in the Adam Eaton deal, they acquired Lucas Giolito and they acquired Raylondo Lopez, which I thought that was an absolute steal, in my opinion. So they're about to trade Jose Quintana for possibly some prospects. But the farm system literally got strong with those two trades. And they were a team that's in real rebuilding mode right now because they just haven't been successful this year and the year before that. I wouldn't be surprised that they happen to trade Todd Frazier as well. I think they might. But I like what they did. I like when teams build their farm system because that's how, if you're not one of those big market teams, if you're not the Red Sox, if you're not New York Yankees, if you're not the Dodgers, you have to build your team through the farm system. And I think the Red Sox, not the Red Sox, I think the White Sox are doing it in a really good way. We've seen what New York is doing with what they did last year in the trade deadline with a lot of young prospects. I think the White Sox are trying to go that route, and they got really good. They got 3 really good pitching prospects. They got 2 of them, and that Adam Eaton deal that played in the majors last year. That's huge. I think that's a very huge for the White Sox.
It's definitely the right recipe in my eyes. You saw what happened in Chicago. They did the exact same thing. Young stars and Chris Bryant, Addison Russell, Javi Baez. You have Rizzo at first base. So you build those young prospects. They develop well. You have a good team, and then you can get those veteran guys, kind of like John Jay this year, those guys who got their money before, now they're kind of chasing that ring. That's really the recipe for a good organization in my eyes. And that's what teams are sort of replicating. You said the New York Yankees, the White Sox probably doing the same thing now. So it makes a lot of sense. I agree. I think it's definitely a good idea.
Yeah. And as far as the worst offseason, which team do you think?
I think the team that by far had the worst offseason, and I kind of feel bad for, is the Washington Nationals. I mean, they lose their closer, Mark Melancon. He goes to the Giants. So they have a hole there. They tried to get Chris Sale. Oh, no, he goes to Boston. They're looking for maybe Andrew McCutchen. We'll see if that happens. It seemed like every guy the Nationals were in for did not go to Washington. So it's like everyone they're going for in free agency doesn't go there. They lose their closer, and then they trade for Adam Eaton. In my eyes, kind of like a panic deal. It's like, oh, we didn't get anyone. We need to make sure we do something. So we give up some good young prospects for an outfielder in Adam Eaton who's decent. I mean, he's all right, but he's not going to really be that flashy big name like, oh, wow, we traded for Adam Eaton. You know what I mean? So I think by far the team with the worst offseason has to go to the Washington Nationals.
Yeah, and Washington, I wouldn't say they had the worst, but they definitely had the most disappointing. They just literally struck out on every free agent or big name out there. It just, they did trade. They did trade for Adam Eaton, which I thought they got kind of robbed in that deal because they traded really 2 pitching prospects that were actually in the rotation last year, and they couldn't get Andrew McCutchen. But I kind of realized why they went for Adam Eaton instead of Andrew McCutchen because Adam Eaton is cheaper. He is under contract for more years, but I kind of feel like they gave up too much for him. And they did hit the panic button. I do think they hit the panic button in that move. I just think they did, and I do think they've been one of the most disappointing. I think they've been the most disappointing team this offseason so far.
I agree with you, buddy. I mean, I think Washington. I really think the Mets are better than them. The Dodgers, the Giants, the Cubs. So I'd say at best they're looking like maybe the 5th best team, 4th best team in the National League. Good pitching, obviously. Steven Strasburg, if he can come back healthy, that will add a whole nother dimension to them in the rotation as well. Max Scherzer, who's the reigning NL Cy Young Award winner. But for me, they just didn't do enough, and other teams did way better. I mean, the Dodgers re-signed everyone, so they have the exact same team. They could add Dozier. The Cubs are the same team. The Cardinals get better with Dexter Fowler. The Giants get better with the bullpen additions they made. So everyone kind of got better while Washington really got worse.
Yeah, and as far as the worst offseason in my eyes, I have to go with the Minnesota Twins. I looked at their transactions this offseason, and they literally didn't get anyone. Their biggest, well, not their biggest, but their 2 most notable signings this offseason is Tommy Malone on a 1-year contract, and they got Jason Castro on a 3-year contract. I'm sorry, actually, Tommy Malone went to Milwaukee. But still, the biggest transaction, the biggest sign they made was Jason Castro, who was the backup catcher for the Astros for the past couple of years. I think, honestly, if they trade Brian Dozier, they would get so much for him, and they haven't done it yet. I just don't know why they haven't done it yet. Why can't they just pull the plug? Why can't they just pull the trigger already on the Brian Dozier trade? You guys haven't done anything this offseason, and for that, the reason why they haven't made that move yet, I think it's really disappointing. They haven't done anything at all. And this is probably one of the worst teams ever in the majors right now.
It's a big decision to make. I mean, it's a big gamble. You're losing out on your best player by far. So it's tough because fans are not patient.
Yeah, that is true. They're not patient at all, and they haven't. But then again, if I'm a fan of Minnesota. If I'm a fan of Minnesota, don't you want your team to be good in the future? And they're not going to win games right now with Brian Dozier. For them to do that, they will have to build around him, and I don't know if they can. They just can't right now.
I get it, but it's a tough thing. We see in sports all the time. How many times do we see a coach get fired or a manager get fired a year, 2 years after they come in there, or even during the season sometimes? It's tough for fans to be patient because all they think about is winning now. I understand things don't happen overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. But for fans, the toughest thing is being patient, and that's one thing that's, I guess, not really tolerated. And you can't fire the players. So who do you turn to? You have to turn to the guy who's leading them, and that's the coach. So it makes a lot of sense, but it's just never going to change.
Yeah, and that is true, but I still think that the Twins have been one of the more disappointing teams. They don't have a lot of free agent signings this year. It's like they didn't even really try. I feel like they didn't really try at all. They didn't put any effort. They didn't even sign the B free agents. When you got the top free agents in the class, and don't get me wrong, there's still some left, which is something I'm gonna get to right now. But they just haven't done a whole lot. And even if they don't trade Brian Dozier, I still think it's really disappointing. But
hold on. If you're a free agent, are you going to want to go to Minnesota?
No,
exactly. So,
and no, like even I'm not talking about like signing like Jose Bautista or like Mark Trimble or something like that. I'm talking about like someone that's more of a lower tier type of free agent. You know, like Rajai Davis. You know, he went to Oakland. He's a kind of like a lower tier free agent. You know, like Drew Storen, we talked about. He's a reliever, but you know, he's more of a lower tier free agent. I'm talking about like guys that are very solid, but are not like a star, so to speak, star power like that. So yeah, if I'm a free agent, I don't want to go to Minnesota because they don't have a winning culture there.
Exactly. So it's a lot harder to attract a lot of the big name guys, even some of the middle tier guys, because they're going to be. I mean, the one thing Minnesota can maybe offer that others can't is just more money. But in baseball, there is no salary cap, so every team can offer the same. They're just willing. Are they willing to pay that luxury tax or not? So it's really just comes down to that.
Yeah, and that's why I think Minnesota's been one of the. They had the worst offseason because I think if they get Brian Dozier, they can build their team the right way in the farm system. I think Jose De Leon would make a great trade piece in a Brian Dozier deal. But there is some free agents out there still in the market. We want to get into them real quick. They're all home run hitters too. So you got Jose Bautista, you got Mark Trumbull, Mike Napoli, and you got Chris Carter. That's a lot of power that has left on the market.
I think really we're seeing a different trend in baseball, and it's sort of why a lot of these big-name power hitters are still on the market, because they only have one specialty. A lot of these guys, if they're in the American League, they're only DHs. Like Edwin Encarnacion, I'm not really convinced can play first base anywhere, so he's forced to play only in the American League, so that takes half the teams out of baseball. A lot of these power hitters are good at one thing, hitting a home run. They don't have speed. They really can't field. They're not going to steal any bases. They're going to strike out a lot, or they're going to hit home runs. Teams are kind of shifting away from that mindset now. It's sort of trending towards getting more on base, getting runners on base, stretching singles into doubles with stolen bases. So a lot of these power hitters are kind of declining as far as value in my eyes.
Yeah, and I do think the fact that Jose Bautista was injured last year, I kind of think that kind of plays a part why he hasn't been signed yet. And I said that around August when he had that one of his injuries, that I wouldn't be surprised if Toronto doesn't bring him back because of that reason. But I do think all four of these guys will have a team by spring training. But it's kind of tough to see. I think honestly they're all going to be in the American League. Because I think Jose Bautista, I think he can still play outfield, but I think teams are going to be reluctant to sign a aging outfielder that can hit a lot of home runs. But they are going to show some interest because of the home runs. I think if a National League team were to sign Bautista, they're probably going to they're going to want to make him play first base. And he has played first base before with the Blue Jays. But as far as Chris Carter, Mark Trumbull, Mike Napoli, I think these are all guys that belong in the American League because we've seen Mark Trumbull, he didn't have a whole lot of success in Arizona in the National League, but I do expect these guys to be signed next season or by spring training.
Yeah, they'll definitely find homes. I mean, there will be teams that will turn to them because they need a power hitter, they need a DH, possibly if there's some sort of injury, so they'll be signed. And you mentioned Bautista. I mean, he's 36 years old, so he's getting up there in age, so it's a question of can he still run in the outfield like someone who's 28 years old can. So we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, and that's why I think Jose Bautista will probably transition to first if a team really wanted to sign him. But, yeah, that concludes our show, Ben. Really good episode.
It's always a great episode.
Yeah, I think every show is good. But, yeah, we'll be back next week. Hopefully we have some more. Hopefully we have teams that made a huge splash. I hope something really big happens within the next week. I really thought the McCutchen and Dozier deals would have happened already, but they haven't. But I do think they will happen by the end of this week. And if McCutchen's still not traded, then maybe we'll still speculate on that. But, yeah, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. As always, I'm Jeremiah.
And my name is Ben.
And you guys have a good day and a pleasant tomorrow.
been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.